Like sexual love, art is of the mind and spirit also, but it is made with the body and it appeals to the senses. To reduce or shortcut the intimacy of the body's involvement in the making of a work of art inevitably risks reducing the work of art and the art itself. In addition to the reasons I gave previously, which I still believe are good reasons, I am not going to use a computer because I don't want to diminish or distort my bodily involvement in my work. I don't want to deny myself the pleasure of bodily involvement in my work, for that pleasure seems to me to be the sign of an indispensable integrity. At first glance, writing may seem not nearly so much of an art of the body as, say, dancing or gardening or carpentry. And yet, language is the most intimately physical of all the artistic means. We have it palpably in our mouths. It is our langue, our tongue. Writing it, we shape it with our hands. Reading aloud what we have written, as we must do if we are writing carefully, our language passes in at the eyes, out of the mouth, in at the ears. The words are immersed and steeped in the senses of the body before they make sense in the mind. They cannot make sense in the mind until they have made sense in the body. Does shaping one's words with one's own hand impart character and quality to them, as does speaking them with one's own tongue to the satisfaction of one's own ear? There is no way to prove that it does. On the other hand, there is no way to prove that it does not, and I believe that it does. That is from Wendell Berry's Why I'm Not Going to Buy a Computer, which is part of this like series of like kind of modern classics that Penguin has put out, I think already quite some time ago. Um, it's funny that he talks about the bodily involvement in work and in art. And the reason this came to my mind is that I have only in the last few years again found and refound the art of cooking and the love of food and the experience of food as kind of love in itself, in a way. And part of reading these books is I'm kind of reading like the opposite of some of the things I think, or like pointing out people that like have very strong opinions on things and reading it. And yeah, this really called to mind like that line made me realize how much I appreciate the connection I have with food again. So after I finished school, I went into like a culinary arts program, and I was working in kind of the fine dining world and training to be a chef, and did that for a number of years. And somewhere along the way, having realized that I was actually better with people, or I was learning more about the people I was working with than I was about the food I was cooking, somewhere along the way, I felt as if I disconnected with the love of food and with cooking, the kind of things that like came for me in making and baking with my mom, like in the kitchen growing up, and the things that like bonded us in a way through food and my own interest. And yeah, somewhere along the way, I think having worked in the kind of food industry and working as a chef and then working in hospitality in general, I kind of disconnected from where I started with it. And I think also deciding to go back to like to study and to change my career path and stuff, somewhere along the way I think I thought less of myself in a way, because I suddenly was surrounded by all of these people who, you know, were studying at a much younger age than me and seemed much more educated than I was. And somewhere I think I interpreted my journey as kind of lesser than, in a way. And so I think that affected my relationship with food and with cooking and with the kind of art form that is a very like body driven setup where you're very kind of intimately involved in the preparation of it. And, people like Nigella Lawson, demonstrate that even more than is maybe necessary sometimes. But it is like a very physical, slow thing to do. And a couple of years ago, more than a couple of years ago at this stage, I was living with someone who was very, very meticulous in kind of his systems and routines and the things he did, and was very, very disciplined and good at kind of sticking to them. And one of the things he did was on a Sunday, he would go and grab all of the food he needed for the week, cook one meal, a couple of meals, and he'd have like all of his food done for the week. And so I started kind of taking pieces from his book and started kind of doing this Sunday reset where essentially there'd be some cleaning involved and there'd be setting up for the week ahead. And then be this process of like going to the supermarket, getting what I'm going to cook, coming home, cooking all of that, and then putting it into, containers and like being set up for the week and not having to worry about what I'm going to eat as I go through the week. And because like nutrition and that kind of thing has always been like important for me as well, I think mostly just because I have like a very sensitive body and like I don't do well if I'm not eating well. So I think that's kind of forced me to care about nutritional content. Um, I really notice a difference in when I'm cooking for myself, but also when I have like the time and space to cook. I found that I find so much love and joy in it. And I really do feel like food is love in a sense. And so while that has nothing to do with Wendell Berry's opinions about buying a computer, he's talking about the rejection of it in lieu or in favor of writing by hand. And he also, from what I understand from this, initial impression of him from this book, is a farmer or was a farmer. And so a lot of his work had an element of physicality to it. And I think there's a part of me now where, because typically so much of my week is spent at a desk, on a laptop, thinking up here a lot about different things, um, there's a joy that comes from going to my local market, which is very luckily like a stone's throw away. Like I can just walk down the street, and having not only the ability to go and like buy stuff from there, but also there's something about the energy of a market where it taps into that same thing, which is everyone a little bit more or a lot more than what you would get at a supermarket. People are somehow involved with the things that they're selling. They've been part of the art and the craft of like creating them and putting themselves into it. And there's a reason why they're stood behind a stall selling their bread or their jam or their cakes or their whatever it is. They're like, there's something that there's like a light for them, or there's a reason they're doing it, or there's something that it kind of hits for them. And I feel like I get that from the experience of going there. And even if I buy nothing, even just like immersing myself in the atmosphere of people selling food and goods and things that they've, in one shape or one way or another, have been part of the creation and making of, is like one of the things I think now I connect with most, and I hold kind of quite almost sacred in my week, that I get to go and have that kind of experience and then come back to the house and have this period of time where I can just be in my own little world, cooking and figuring out what's going to go well with what and how I'm going to figure this out and what I want to use and what I don't. And sometimes it's not that great and sometimes it's annoying and I'm over it. And it's constantly frustrating that I am so messy and I'm the one that has to clean it up. And I am not a clean as you go kind of person. I'm still used to the experience of working in a kitchen where you would like, tup, 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 and then you would hand something to like into the kitchen to be like, oh, that's dirty now. And that sounds terrible. It's not like I'm chucking everything left, right, and center, but like that routine of not having to actually clean after yourself, I'm still in that modus. So I pretty much use every single thing in the kitchen. And then afterwards, I'm like shedding a tear that I have to clean it. But it still happens, it still gets done. But there's something to having your using your senses and your body and doing things in a very manual way that while I don't know if I'm going to be boycotting my computer anytime soon, and I think the more modern version of that would be, having a very strong opinion against AI and, having a very strong take there, which I can understand and which I'm going to read strong opinions of also. But I do think I rate the idea of having things that you do very, very manually. And I think what's interesting about the kind of increase in use of kind of technology is that there's this resurge of connecting in alternate ways. I don't know about you, but a lot of my friend groups love a board game night more than ever in the last few years. Um, Everyone, it seems like, is wanting to go and do like a pottery class or is getting more into things that are like a little bit more artistic or creative or trying to tap into those parts of themselves, which happen to also be very much kind of this crafting of something or this art form that involves the manual use and kind of the holistic use of your body and your senses and like that kind of activity. And there's really something to that. And today I got chatting to one of the men who owns one of the stalls down at my local market. And he sells these beautiful native mushrooms and like these beautiful produce. And we got chatting, and he's an older gentleman, and he'd lost someone very close to him very recently, and I'd never met him before. We just got chatting, but you really don't know what's happening in people's lives or what's going on for people's setups and spaces that offer the ability to form some sort of community. I find I'm attracted to those like a marketplace or something like that, where it offers kind of a realm for connecting in a more manual or a more connected way that that connection and that conversation kind of touched me in a way that I think would be so different from reading an email or reading a post online or something like that. Like there's something about being in person and the community building of it all and having that as part of something that you're embedded in. Um, and I think I feel very lucky that I've been able to reconnect with food and with that part of myself. And um, yeah, I felt like sharing that with you, apparently.